Amen. You know, it's interesting that we're outside. One of my favorite preachers, if you will, is a guy by the name of George Whitefield. And he lived from about the early 1700s and died, I think, 1784 in the United States. He was a British man who preached, and his preaching was so revolutionary during his day that they actually kicked him out of the churches and would not let him go into any place to preach the gospel. So he said, well, I'm going to go outside. So he'd go outside and he'd preach, and he reached a group of people that never would have entered a church before. And it's pretty cool that you know, we have the opportunity to come outside to partake, if you will, of the gospel without fear, without being really kicked out of a place, but just being able to meet. And you know, again, we'll be in it somewhere else soon, but George Whitefield's one of my favorite guys, so it's kind of fun. He was actually said to have a voice that could minister to 5,000 to 10,000 people at a time on a quiet day. And Ben Franklin, I know, he was a deist. He wasn't a Christian, but Ben Franklin would actually go out and say, I don't believe the rumors about this guy. So he would go and listen to him share the gospel to 5,000 to 10,000 people, astonished that yes, his voice does carry that far. In fact, when he would sail from England over the United States, he would stand on the helm, and they would have 2 or 3 ships at a time, and twice a day he would teach for 45 minutes from the helm of the first ship back to every single ship, and they'd all be able to hear him. It's pretty sweet. We're not going to talk about any of that stuff today, but Joshua chapter 4. Now, sometimes God delights in taking the ordinary and accomplishing the extraordinary. And I know you guys are looking, there's a pile of stones right here that I took from my house and set for a specific reason right here. I know some of you are going, why in the world did he bring rocks to church today? Well, there's a specific reason. So let's read in verse 1, chapter 4. And it came to pass, when all the people had completely crossed over the Jordan, that the Lord spoke to Joshua, saying, take for yourselves 12 men from the people, 1 man from every tribe, and command them, saying, take for yourselves 12 stones from here, out of the midst of the Jordan, from the place where the priest's feet stood firm. You shall carry them over with you, and leave them in the lodging place where you lodge tonight. Then Joshua called the 12 men whom he had appointed from the children of Israel, 1 man from every tribe. And Joshua said to them, cross over before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of the Jordan, and each one of you shall take up a stone upon his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the children of Israel, that this may be a sign among you when your children ask in time to come, saying, what do these stones mean to you? Now, we'll back up a little bit and give you, it's really a 2-point outline today. Pretty simple. Point number 1, God calls us before he calls us to greatness. God calls us, just in simplicity, before he calls us to greatness. Point number 2, that again, God uses the ordinary to proclaim, to accomplish the extraordinary. Now, the first thing, Joshua chapter 3, verse 15. Before Israel crossed over the Jordan into the land of Canaan, into the promised land, God commanded Joshua, hey, set apart 12 men, 1 from each tribe. That's all he told Joshua. So Joshua went to each tribe and he said, give me 1 willing person. 1 man, that's all I'm asking for. I think it's interesting that God, again, didn't say until after they had already said, all right, God, here I am, did God give them the instruction on what they were going to do. Question, as a Christian, the things that you've experienced right now, some of them have been bad, haven't they? Some of them have been difficult. If God would have said to you, all right, you're going to come to Christ and these are all the things that are going to happen to you, would you be more hesitant to follow him? Some yes, some no. I know with Paul, he said, hey, Paul, go and do this, and I'm going to show you how many things you got to suffer for my name's sake. That was his gospel message. That would have scared me. God said, I'm going to make you suffer for my name's sake. See you later, right? But God calls before he gives us specifics. I think that's important. Why? He's looking at the heart. When God calls us, he's not saying, I want somebody who is going to set out for greatness, and I'm going to tell him what he's going to do, and if he likes it, he's going to accept it, and if he doesn't like it, that's okay. I'm God. I'll change my plans for him so that he likes it. God's looking for a willing servant, a willing heart. Since Jess and I are running the children's ministry now, we get to meet with people about serving. I had a gentleman come into my office the other day and wanted to be a teacher. So I'm talking with him and go over, and even before I speak a word other than, hi, my name's Adam, come into my office, he looks at me and he says, before I get any further, I just need to make one point. I said, all right, so that we don't waste our time, I don't use a curriculum to teach. I said, okay, what do you use to teach? He said, I use the book. That's what I use. I use the book. I don't need no curriculum. They're boring. I said, okay, well, that's fine. So all I ask is that if you're going to teach, that you go from the passage that's in the curriculum, so we're all on the same page, and then you can do whatever you want. As long as it's biblically centered, that's fine. He goes, all right, good. Okay, we can meet now. I'm like, who's leading the meeting here anyways, you know? In the back of my mind, I'm going, I don't want this guy, to be honest with you. Because anybody that comes in with, I'm going to tell you how I'm going to do things, it's going to be my way, that's a red flag that goes up. Later on in the meeting, we met for about a half an hour, and then finally I said, now, what service would you be interested in helping out with? So he said, well, where do you have a need for a teacher? And I said, we don't. Even though we do. I lied. You know, so we don't for you right now. But, you know, if you want to begin as an assistant or helping kids sign in and sign out of the classroom, that's fine. He goes, no. I said, what do you mean, no? He goes, I'm not called to assist, I'm called to lead. Now, you guys know that the reason that he's no longer at our church is pride. I didn't kick him out, he actually left. He said, if I can't do this, then God doesn't have me here because he's called me to teach and I'm leaving. Now, is that humility? No. God looks for the humble person. You see, God calls us, God may place something upon our hearts, but it often takes years to get to that place. Remember, Moses was called at the age of 40 to be the deliverer of the children of Israel. How many years passed before he actually fulfilled that role? 40 more years. For 40 years, he had God's calling on his life, waiting for the Lord to put him in that specific position. David, the king of Israel. I don't know if you knew this, but for 13 years, he fled from Saul after he'd been called by God to be king. For 13 years, he ran for his life. And it wasn't until Saul had died and there was an uprising that this other individual died that Saul was actually placed in the position that God had originally called him to. Again, 13 years passed. He had the calling, but he was patient. Isaiah chapter 6. I love this chapter.